Following on from RPM Racing, I think it's high time we cover the next game over at our friends at Blizzard that started the chain reaction towards where they are today. You see, given the fact that RPM wasn't the success it should have been, despite having some reasonable ideas and pushing the company's credibility towards, that team that does Amiga ports, it makes Lost Vikings all the more impressive. After all, this is a game that made them consider going it alone. There's a level of confidence here that really shouldn't exist from a developer with such a sketchy past, especially when combining the puzzle, action and platforming genres. As for the game's main hook, it's simple. You control 3 Vikings with your own unique skills. One can use a sword or bow to vanquish enemies and hit switches. One is a defensive, using a shield to protect himself and everything behind him, while our third character can, run and jump. The shoulder buttons introduce the idea that, we could swap between Vikings quickly to let you solve the various puzzles and find the X's on each stage. That shuffleability between those buttons is something that frequently comes up in games produced by the company there, and also in later genres as well. Hell, the variety above is enhanced further in the Lost Vikings with the items that you can find during your journey, but it never becomes a chore to travel through each section. Every part of the game feels fairly similar up until the points with the spaceship, but the puzzles are progressive but never too taxing. There's always a logic into how you're going to use the Vikings to proceed to the exit and through the stage, and as you go through each stage you're gradually learning the story more and more as to why they're here, who took them and how they're going to get home. For me, playing this game, it was the first real time I got to play with the concept of more than one lead character. Sure, we could look at the Sega Mega Drive with Sonic and Tails and the idea that you would always carry a second player around and go from run to jump, etc. And there are many other 2-player games around where if the first character dies you can take over the second character to continue your journey. But this was the first item that we really had the idea of switching the main protagonist over to use a different skill set. And perhaps maybe that was intriguing and interesting enough that just alone, nowadays, that one gimmick would never sell a title. But back 20 years ago, this was fantastic. This opened up a whole new area of expertise. Suddenly you're not tied down to one very convoluted control system, trying to mash a number of run, jump, use, tackle items onto multiple buttons. So you weren't hit with an uncumbersome control screen within your gamepad. This helped release that tension. One Viking, one simple button layout. Switch the pad over to an alternate Viking, different button combination to use different facilities, but yet you still have the same navigation and the same action button. It's a breath of fresh air, a little bit of genius there that made the whole game so worthwhile to play. If you add on top of that an excellent soundtrack that, to be fair, the guys at Blizzard really put together in such a fantastic way, it keeps you hooked in the game probably more than I would have liked to have thought. For me, The Lost Vikings feels an instant classic, and it's well and truly deserved, and it should be. It's more criminal that we only ever received one sequel to this, and we never had another tale in that franchise, let alone a modern update of the whole system. But in truth, when looking at this, trying to pick up, I suppose, faults with the game, the only one I can really give is perhaps a fault with the entire puzzle genre. especially its early days, where the idea of a task would have to be repeated multiple times to solve the aforementioned puzzle in front of you. Or realistically, as soon as you find out, the loss of a point and click option to automatically move your characters to a set position isn't here. That convenience that we rely on nowadays felt a bit more cumbersome back then. Especially when you're cycling through each of your Vikings to move them, especially manually to set positions in order to achieve the task at hand. It almost feels like a time-consuming chore, and a little bit like padding rather than streamlining the process and allowing people to get that euphoria of a completed stage. But these exercises nowadays are a flash in the pan. Yeah, it's an oversight in programming that back then really wasn't looked at and really wasn't thought carefully through. And you can't really blame the project manager for that. This is just part of evolution of game design. Every genre has it, and every genre will continue to have it as we continue. Of course, outside of this, there's, I suppose, the two-player mode that enhances the experience. Adds a little bit more interest to it. I mean, I never really got to touch that part throughout this playthrough, so I'm not really going to put much of a judgment on it, but if anything, having that in here was an extra caveat that just made it more worthwhile in my opinion. I'm supposed to end this, and it feels like such a quick review. There's a lot we could really say to this game, but I feel you almost need a half an hour analysis of this title, which I suppose at some point we will take a look at in further detail. But if you've never played this absolute gem in history, it's well worth a look. For me, talking about this, I don't want to go into the plot line in any great detail, purely because it's a simple tale of Vikings being abducted and they're hoped and raced to try to get back home. And in essence, that's all you need. The rest of the dialogue within the game makes it a charming romp, and one that's worthy of reading and observing for the first time. And I would not take that away from anyone. For a simple review, this is more than a play it. This felt incredible to me. Glitches aside of things that could have been made better, this is still an undeniable classic. It's one that we still remember fondly today, but is often not played on the likes of Twitch and many of the retro scene, and it really should. It's one that sold Snes systems, it's one that sold Amigas in particular, and one that, even with remakes of sequels potentially into the future, it deserves more of a chance. It deserves more people taking a look at it. I implore anyone who's listening to this, if you've never experienced Lost Vikings, find the copy, play it on whatever system you can, and sit with it just for 30 minutes, just for the first couple of stages, just to get the feel of it, and you'll understand why so many people enjoy this. For the latest news, reviews, retro footage, retro reviews, and everything else in between. Until then, like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care. For more reviews like this, check out thatretrovideogamer.com for the latest news, reviews, retro footage, retro reviews, and everything else in between. Until then, like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.